Washington Irving and the Birth of an American Legend. Before Rip Van Winkle became a legend, he was just an idea, a whisper in the imagination of one man. A man who loved stories, silence, and the strange magic hidden in everyday life. That man was Washington Irving, the first true American storyteller. And his creation of Rip Van Winkle wasn't just about a man who slept for 20 years. It was about a nation trying to wake up and remember who it was. The young dreamer from New York, Washington Irving, was born in 1783, the same year the American Revolution officially ended. It was a time of rebirth, when the smoke of war was settling, and a new country was taking its first uncertain breath. Irving grew up in New York City, then still a small town of cobbled streets, sailing ships, and Dutch-style houses. He was a quiet, observant boy, more interested in wandering by the river and daydreaming about distant lands than in politics or business. When he was young, his parents took him to see George Washington, the living symbol of America's victory. The boy was so inspired that he signed his name Washington Irving for the rest of his life, as if destiny had whispered in his ear, "You will tell America's story." But America, at that time, had no real stories of its own. There were no myths, no ancient heroes, no Arthurian legends. Europe had centuries of folklore, dragons, knights, ghosts, while the new United States had farms, merchants, and dusty towns. Irving wanted to change that. A nation without myths in the early 1800s, America was full of energy but short on identity. It had freedom but no roots. It had heroes, but no legends. Writers still looked to England for inspiration. Poetry, plays, novels, all carried the scent of Europe. But Irving saw something different, a wild, untamed land filled with stories waiting to be told. He began collecting local legends and oral tales from Dutch settlers and early colonists. They spoke of strange lights in the woods, ghostly figures on mountain trails, and men who vanished without a trace. From these whispers, Irving began to weave a new kind of story, one that felt uniquely American. In search of the Old World in 1804, Irving traveled to Europe for the first time, partly to escape illness, partly to seek inspiration. He wandered through the streets of London, Paris, and Dresden, reading old folk tales and meeting writers who lived by the pen. But even there, across the ocean, his heart belonged to the Hudson Valley, to the land of misty hills, sleepy villages, and Dutch ghosts. He missed the strange stillness of the Catskills, the people who lived slow and honest lives, untouched by the fever of progress. In 1815, tragedy struck. His family business failed. His fiancée, Matilda Hoffman, died young. Irving was devastated. He was stranded in England, heartbroken, and searching for purpose. And it was in that loneliness that the dream of Rip Van Winkle began to take shape. The birth of Rip Van Winkle one night. While staying at an old inn in Birmingham, Irving recalled the stories he had heard back home, especially those about men vanishing into the mountains and spirits haunting the hills. He mixed them with a tale he had read from German folklore, a story called Peter Klaus the Goatherd. But instead of a shepherd in the Alps, Irving imagined a humble American farmer. Instead of sleeping through a medieval curse, this man would sleep through the American Revolution itself. The result was poetic. A single man's sleep mirroring the birth of an entire nation. When Rip closed his eyes, America was a colony. When he opened them, it was a republic. Through that transformation, Irving found his voice, a quiet, reflective way of storytelling that felt both ancient and new. It wasn't about war or politics. It was about time, change, and identity. The Sketchbook, America's first bestseller in 1819, Irving published The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent, a collection of short stories and essays that included Rip Van Winkle and the legend of Sleepy Hollow. It was an instant success, in America and in Europe. Readers were enchanted. For the first time, they saw that America could have its own legends, stories with the mystery of the old world, but the heart of the new Rip Van Winkle stood out because it wasn't just fantasy. It was nostalgia. The feeling of waking up after too long a dream, only to realize the world has moved on without you. Irving's writing was gentle, almost dreamlike. He didn't preach or argue. He painted pictures and dozens of mountains wrapped in fog, of sleepy towns, of quiet souls who just wanted peace. He made readers feel what Rip felt: confusion, wonder, loss, and acceptance. The message beneath the story. At first glance, Rip Van Winkle seems like a fairy tale, but underneath it carries a deep reflection on the American spirit. Rip represents the people who wanted to hold on to the simplicity of the past. The calm, communal life before ambition and revolution changed everything. His long sleep symbolizes the loss of innocence, how the country woke up into modernity and found itself changed forever. When Rip returns, no one knows him anymore, just as many Americans, after the revolution, no longer recognized their own land. Old loyalties had faded. Old values had shifted. Everything felt faster, louder, and more restless. Irving, in his quiet way, was asking, what do we lose when we change too quickly? What happens to the dreamers in a world that no longer dreams? The genius of simplicity. Washington Irving's genius was not in complexity, but in emotion. He didn't invent monsters or grand heroes. He gave the world something far more human, a story about time, memory, and peace. He made the ordinary magical. He took a quiet village and turned it into a legend that would live for centuries. He made people see America differently, not just as a new land, but as a place rich with myth and meaning. Irving once wrote, "There is a certain majesty and simplicity which is far above all the quaintness of wit." Through Rip, he proved that sometimes the simplest stories are the ones that stay forever. A sleep that never ends. As the years passed, Rip Van Winkle took on a life of its own. Artists painted him, actors performed him, and schools taught his story as a symbol of early American identity. The real Catskills became a kind of pilgrimage site, a place where dreamers and wanderers could stand beneath the same mist and imagine Rip's eternal rest. Even today, 200 years later, people visit the region and claim they can still feel something strange in the air, as if the ghosts of those Dutch bowlers still play their game somewhere among the cliffs. It's said that on stormy nights, when thunder rolls across the mountains, it isn't thunder at all. It's the sound of the nine pins echoing through time. From local tale to national symbol, by giving the world Rip Van Winkle, Washington Irving did more than tell a story. He gave America its first myth, a tale that wasn't borrowed but born from its own soil. A legend that reminded people that history isn't just wars and politics, it's the quiet lives of ordinary souls. Rip wasn't a soldier or a leader. He was just a man who wanted peace, and that made him timeless. Because no matter how fast the world moves, there's a part of every human heart that longs to escape, to rest, to find a place where time stands still. And that's why Rip Van Winkle still sleeps. Not in a cave, but in the imagination of everyone who hears his story.